Welcome back. And if this is your first time here, welcome. Because tonight we are not stepping into the realm of marble statues and imperial speeches, but into a part of the city that functioned quietly, efficiently, and without shame, even though modern audiences often struggle to look at it directly. We are going to walk into an ancient Roman brothel, not through imagination alone, but through the words that were physically carved into its walls by the people who used it, the people who worked inside it, and the society that allowed it to operate openly as part of everyday urban life. You are in a Roman city in the early evening, when the heat of the day has begun to loosen its grip on the stone streets, when merchants are closing their stalls, when wine is being poured more generously, and when foot traffic naturally drifts away from the forum toward neighborhoods where taverns, cookshops, and entertainment cluster together. There is no sign announcing where you are going, because none is needed. And there is no sense of secrecy about your destination, because everyone already knows what the building is and why it exists. The entrance is narrow and unremarkable, a stone doorway set into a plain facade, the kind of structure you might walk past without noticing if you did not already understand its purpose. But once you step inside, the space immediately makes its intentions clear. The corridor is long and tight, the walls close enough that you could touch both sides at once, with oil lamps set into small niches that cast a low, uneven light across the plaster, creating shadows that move constantly as the flames flicker. And it is here, in this dim passageway, that the true record of the place begins to reveal itself. The walls are not clean, and they are not silent, because nearly every available surface has been scratched, carved, or marked by human hands, leaving behind hundreds of inscriptions that range from crude stick figures to carefully written phrases, names, prices, and short statements of presence, each one representing a moment when someone felt compelled to leave evidence that they had been there. These inscriptions are not hidden, not disguised, and not poetic in any elevated sense, because they were never meant to be preserved, admired, or interpreted by future generations. They were casual, functional, and honest, the Roman equivalent of writing your name on a wall simply to assert that you existed in that place at that time. As you move down the corridor, you begin to notice doorways opening off to either side, some covered by thin curtains, others open enough to reveal the interiors. And inside these small rooms, you see women waiting, not posed theatrically and not performing seduction, but sitting or standing with the stillness of people conserving energy, wearing short tunics that are practical rather than decorative, garments chosen for ease of movement and speed rather than beauty. Their expressions are neutral, professional, and practiced, shaped by repetition rather than emotion. And while their faces are visible, their lives are not, because nothing in this space is designed to preserve individuality beyond what is useful to the transaction. Above many of these doorways are painted frescoes, simple images showing different arrangements between men and women, not created as art in the modern sense, but as visual information, communicating quickly and clearly what was available behind each curtain, eliminating the need for conversation, negotiation, or misunderstanding. Next to these images, scratched directly into the plaster, you begin to see numbers, small at first, then repeated often enough that their meaning becomes unmistakable, because these are prices written plainly for anyone to read. 2 asses, 4 asses, 16 asses. These numbers are not symbolic, and they are not exaggerated, because in Roman currency, 2 asses was the cost of a loaf of bread or a basic meal, meaning that at the lowest level of the brothel, sex was priced at the same value as food, a comparison that tells you everything about how normalized and transactional this system had become. The cheaper prices correspond to the ground floor rooms, where the spaces are little more than stone cells with built-in masonry beds, no doors, minimal privacy, and no expectation of comfort, designed for speed and volume rather than experience, while the higher prices signal something different. If you have 16 asses, the equivalent of a full day's wage for a common soldier, you are not expected to remain in the corridor, and your attention naturally shifts toward the wooden staircase at the far end, worn smooth by years of use, where the manager of the establishment, the Leno, watches the flow of customers with a detached, professional eye. He does not advertise, and he does not persuade, because his role is not to sell desire, but to manage movement. And when he sees that you are clean, well-dressed, and carrying money, he gestures toward the stairs without speaking, indicating that you belong on the upper floor. Upstairs, the atmosphere changes slightly, not because the nature of the transaction is different, but because the illusion surrounding it becomes more elaborate. As the rooms are larger, the doors are solid wood rather than curtains, and the beds are raised on wooden frames with thin mattresses instead of bare stone slabs. Inside one of these rooms, a woman reclines on the bed, her posture relaxed but deliberate, her hair carefully arranged in a style that suggests time and effort were invested earlier in the day, and when she looks at you, she smiles with an expression that is practiced enough to be professional, yet warm enough to feel personal. Her clothing is light, belted high, thin enough to suggest her shape without revealing it outright, and her Latin carries an accent that marks her as foreign, possibly Greek or from the eastern provinces, a detail that mattered to Roman clients and was often recorded in graffiti because foreignness was considered desirable and worth paying extra for. You state your price, she accepts, and in this moment, what you are buying is not merely physical access, but the performance of choice, conversation, and temporary exclusivity. As she pours watered wine into clay cups, asks where you are from, and speaks in a way that makes the interaction feel less like a transaction and more like a brief social encounter. On the walls of this room, there are fewer inscriptions, but the ones that exist are quieter, less boastful, sometimes recording nothing more than a name or a simple statement of presence. And one such inscription found in Pompeii records a man who paid for the room and slept alone, missing someone he loved, a reminder that even within this system, human emotion occasionally surfaced and left a trace. Outside the room, the machinery never stops, because downstairs the corridor continues to fill and empty, the women rotate in and out of rooms, money changes hands, and the state quietly takes its share through taxes and registration, because prostitution in Rome is not merely tolerated, but regulated, classified, and profitable. Roman moralists defended this system openly, arguing that brothels protected respectable households by providing an outlet for male desire, and by placing that desire in controlled spaces, the social order remained intact, while the women who worked inside these buildings existed permanently outside respectability, marked by law as infames and excluded from the protections enjoyed by respectable women. The walls never mention exhaustion, pain, or repetition, but archaeology fills in those silences, as skeletal remains from Roman cities show patterns of stress and injury consistent with repetitive physical labor, particularly in the knees, hips, and lower back, suggesting lives shaped by relentless routine rather than isolated encounters. When you leave the building, stepping back into the cooling evening air, no one notices, no one questions you, and no one judges you, because what you have just done is not scandalous, not secret, and not unusual, but simply part of life in a city that chose regulation over denial. Years later, disaster preserves what time would have erased, as volcanic ash freezes the walls, the rooms, the inscriptions, and the frescoes in place, leaving behind a record that no one intended to survive. And today, we read those words not as confessions or provocations, but as evidence of how a powerful civilization chose to organize intimacy. The Roman brothel walls do not shock because they are explicit, but because they are honest, because they reveal a system that made sex visible, affordable, and regulated, while rendering the people who sustained it largely invisible beyond their usefulness. The machinery has changed, the language has softened, and the legal frameworks have evolved, but the transaction itself remains familiar, even if we now hide it behind euphemism rather than carving the price on plaster.